Hi, my name is Makeba Rainey. I am a visual artist from Harlem, currently living in Philadelphia. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the project that I presented at Photoville called The Souls Of. The Souls Of is an art project that archives people's oral histories as the landscapes of their neighborhoods change so that their culture and that they create may never be forgotten. The two components of this project include digital collage portraits of Black women from gentrified communities and an archive of their oral histories. The project was started in 2018, which was the 150th anniversary of W.E.B. Du Bois's birth year. Du Bois was a civil rights activist, writer, historian, and archivist, among many other things. So the title of this project pays homage to one of his most well-known books, The Souls of Black Folks. So before we get into the work, let's quickly talk about gentrification. Right? So what is gentrification? Gentrification is the process of changing the character of a neighborhood by bringing in wealthier residents and new business. So gentrification increases the monetary value of a neighborhood, but in order to make room for this new money, long-term residents are often forced to leave. So erasure of culture is an effect of gentrification, right? Archiving is a way to combat cultural erasure. An archive is a collection of artifacts, documents, records, etc. that are collected for the purposes of preservation, and in this case, cultural preservation. So for this project, I'm archiving the oral histories of Black women from gentrified communities. Oral history is an oral account of historical significance that is captured through the process of recording an interview. So it's a way to pass down knowledge through generations. During slavery, when enslaved Africans were not permitted to read or write and families were being forcibly separated, oral history was an important tool to preserve our self-knowledge, right? So you know the saying, history is written by the victors. So it still holds true today. A lot of outdated and misconstrued information is spread in history books and other Western civilization sources. So oral history is still relevant now or in any situation where groups of people are not in control of how they're being portrayed to the public. So one of the goals of this project is to empower community members by letting them control their narratives. So in addition to the interviews, I create digital collage portraits of Black women from gentrified communities. Collage is essentially cut and paste art, or any form of art where you're putting together materials that did not originally exist together can be considered collage. Paper collage is the most common type of collage. The foundation of my digital collage work is photography. I either take the photos myself or hire a photographer. My mother actually took a lot of photos for this particular project. I use Photoshop. I'm not a graphic designer, so I'm not a Photoshop expert or anything. When I don't know how to do something in Photoshop, but I have a clear idea for what I want the work to look like, I will look up tutorials on YouTube. In terms of where I source my patterns, I've accumulated a nice collection of African fabric. A lot of the images that I use are photos of actual fabrics. As I mentioned earlier, for this project, I focus on Black women because they have been positioned to be the single heads of Black households. Due to systemic oppression and racism, Black men are often missing from the picture, literally in this case. So in order to follow the migration story of Black families, I unfortunately have to focus on Black women. So each woman has to self-identify as Black, right? Each woman has to be either born and or raised in a community that is currently being gentrified or has been completely gentrified. And, you know, those are the three requirements, you know, Black, woman, born and raised in a community that's currently being gentrified. So then there are my strict guidelines. I wanted this to be an intergenerational conversation, so the youth, elders, and all ages in between are represented here. An important part of my practice is cultivating African diasporic unity. So race and nationality are often conflated, but they're not the same. Your nationality is your country of origin, the place you were born. American for America, Jamaican for Jamaica, Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, Haitian, Mexican, etc. So race, on the other hand, is often associated with skin tone or ethnicity. Black, white, Latinx, Native. A person can be both black and Mexican. You take Lupita Nyong'o, for example. She was born in Mexico and her nationality is Mexican, but she is racially black. So I started off by interviewing women I knew personally, friends and fam. And I was interested in their relationships to their neighborhoods, their families' relationships to their neighborhoods, folks whose families have lived in one area for many generations. Their communities play a huge role in how they define themselves, right? For folks like that, they're often very proud of where they come from. You know, shout out to all my folks in Brooklyn. So I like talking to these people because they generally have strong feelings about gentrification and a better understanding of the culture specific to their communities. I also tend to look for people who do some type of social justice work within their community because they can make clear connections between what's happening and why it's happening. So yeah, we'll talk about Brittany. This is Brittany. I'm going to use her portrait to talk about the design layout for this particular body of work. Yeah, above each portrait is a quote and short description of who the person is. So in the description and the quote, I try to make connections between how their environment influences who they are and the work that they do. Here it says, I was born in a black girl paradise, one with harsh realities like poverty, drugs, violence, and unmatched possibility, hustle, and community care. Brittany, bedside, entrepreneur, homegirl. So Brittany is the co-founder of the Homegirl Box, a gift box inspired by the life and legacy of bold and visionary women of color. You can see from her quote that in addition to witnessing poverty, violence, and drugs, she decided to create her own opportunities and become an entrepreneur. She was able to do so because her community supported her. So I think you can safely assume that in communities where poverty, violence, and drugs are major problems, folks are still able to see value in themselves, and especially their youth, young girls in this case. So maybe the issues are not prevalent by choice, but by circumstance, right? So this is Dominique London. So I base the patterns and colors on information I gather from the interviews I conduct with each woman. So London is a lead strategist and researcher for a local Black liberation organization in Philadelphia. Philly has one of the largest Black populations. It is one of the poorest big cities in America. Philly is also one of the fastest developing cities in America. So here is a list of the questions that I asked. So I don't have a short quote from London, so I will read her long form answer to these questions, and you can see how, you know, the list of questions are answered. So I'm from Winfield. It is often not thought of as part of Philly because of how suburban it looks. It sits in the middle of the largest urban park system in the country. My fondest memory of Winfield is finding out that the first and only Black polo team was right in my area. I went to watch them practice and take care of the horses and was immediately in love with how many hidden gems this part of the city continues to unveil. The thing that defines Winfield is the access to several worlds in one place. You can be in the hood, close to green space, corporate spaces, and close to natural and historic landmarks within blocks of each other. As an organizer, being from West Philly has taught me that preserving the culture and owning my own narrative is vital. West Philly is changing and is starting to look differently from the West Philly I grew up in. There tends to be an erasure of culture and the stories of the residents when gentrification takes over an area. So for her portrait, I decided to use earth tones to reflect the green space that she was talking about. Her shirt is actually a mix of patterns formed in shapes that mimic camouflage. We've known each other for a while, so London was already familiar with my work before agreeing to participate. And she wore these beautiful mudcloth pants to the photo shoot, so I kept a lot of those original details. Mudcloth is a handmade cotton fabric from Mali that is dyed with fermented mud. I accentuated her pants with a smaller mudcloth pattern of a different design. Besides the mudcloth, the other patterns that I use are known as Ankara or African waxcloth and are popular in countries like Ghana and Nigeria. So these textiles have specific cultural meanings and uses, and the pattern on her sleeve is a very popular pattern called record because it looks like an old vinyl record. London is also a rapper, so I use the record pattern to reflect that as well. The yellow pattern in her shirt is called lips and is considered to be a feminine pattern. I use it to accentuate her femininity and also acknowledge how important her voice is to her work. So there is a green floral pattern you can see peeking out from behind her, and the shape also accentuates her curves and her femininity, but I generally like to use florals when creating portraits of Black people as a reminder that we are of this earth. Finally, there is a tiny horse at the bottom right corner that was taken from an Ankara print called Happy Wife. As a general rule, I only use Ankara for portraits of Black people, and I steer clear of colors and patterns that have very specific uses within African communities. Additionally, I do as much research as possible when choosing patterns. And because I don't ever want to say the wrong thing about someone, it is important to know how folks are generally using the fabric. So if you decide to use culturally specific patterns in your work, do your research or choose textiles that you're already familiar with. A fun and useful exercise could be to take photos on your phone or with a standard digital camera of different patterns that you find in your home or outside in nature. They can be floor tiles, patterns from wall designs, plants, buildings, literally anything. And you can use those photos in your digital collage work. You can even create your own patterns by repeating an image in like a uniformed way. You can make paper collages by printing out different design elements and piecing those together. You can also create paper collage with old books, magazines. Paper collage is a great way to experiment with layout and composition. Fabric collage is also great. Here is an example of a fabric collage portrait that I made of myself, right, using fabric scraps and heat transfer paper, right? So I printed out a portrait of myself on heat transfer paper and ironed it onto a piece of fabric and added some trim and notion to accentuate my portrait. But if you don't have heat transfer paper, you can also create a collage or a portrait of yourself. This is a fabric portrait that I did by painting my silhouette. It's not done. I have to add some details to my clothes, but I also use a Dankra stamp. I think the most important thing to take away is to use whatever you have on hand. A collage is literally artwork that is made from different materials, right? So you can literally use anything that you have. Let me say that I am not a photographer by profession. I am a photographer by necessity, right? So in order to create the work that I do, I have to take photos of people. And as important as I think photography is, I wouldn't say that I'm particularly good at it. So the urgency of this project required that I work with I work with professional photographers to get the right photo in the least amount of time. That being said, there were a lot of photos in my house growing up. I vaguely remember my mother taking photo classes in college. She was and still is a great photographer. Like I said before, she took a lot of photos for this project. I am thankful for her willingness to support my art, and I'm glad we were able to work together. Even though I was not always fond of her photography, I remember being super annoyed because she was constantly taking photos of me and my brothers. To this day, she constantly takes photos of us like all the time, and it's a little excessive. I still like getting the wallet-sized photos. I have one right here. I think it's really great to gift a piece of yourself. That's something that's really sweet and symbolic, and I like it a lot. So I do collect those, and I still enjoy getting those from friends and family. I collect family photos. So my grandmother passed about 6 years ago, and I sort of inherited her collection. Photography is really great for archival purposes. A photograph is a physical artifact. It documents a specific time and place. For me, photography and film, especially documentary film, are the two methods of cultural preservation that are super important, because you sort of get transported back to a specific place and time, and you can come close to experiencing it as if you were there. A photograph or a film relays so much more information than written word, because there is less room to insert your own personal prejudice. There's less room for interpretation. Of course, all of these methods of documentation, photo, film, and writing, work best when presented together to provide a fuller context for whatever it is you may be documenting. Yeah, you get a better understanding of who you are because you can see, you know, where you come from, and that's pretty much the foundation of the kind of work that I'm doing with this project. You do this work, you collect, you document, you archive, so that future generations can have a better understanding of where they come from, and therefore a better understanding of who they are. I have to give a lot of credit to my mother for cultivating the creative spirit that I have. She herself is an artist, she's a musician, and a photographer. So she exposed me and my brothers to many different cultures as kids. She nurtured us into becoming artists. Both of my brothers are music producers. I used to take classes at the 92nd Street Y in Manhattan when I was in middle school, and I guess that's where my fine arts training began. I've received almost 10 years of training as a fine artist, but not in photography or digital collage. I've been creating digital art since 2008, getting started by using the Microsoft Paint program to make art. So that's about 12 years of honing my skills as a digital artist. So I would say it is important to continue to develop your artistic eye through continuing education, by being in conversation with other artists, and by constantly striving to be a better artist, however it is you do that. I'm always developing my skills because different projects require different mediums. For me, the project and the goals of the project will always dictate the medium that I use. For example, including oral history accounts in this project was important for so many reasons. For one, it added more depth, but most importantly, it allowed these women to be in control of their narratives, right? However, I'm not an archivist. So what did that mean for me? I had to go out and educate myself on the best practices for doing this kind of work. And I had to collaborate and consult with archivists and oral historians who have been doing this work for a long time and who are more knowledgeable than me. I like this question. I think it's important to fail, and I think people who fail are often the most successful because they keep failing, but they also keep getting back up, right? So about 4 years ago, I was fired from the last job I ever had. This time was particularly hard because I didn't feel like it was justified. I felt extremely powerless in that situation. I knew something wrong was being done to me, and I could not do anything about it. I invested a lot of time and energy in that job, so much so that I wasn't focused on my art practice, and I suffered a little bit for that. I wasn't creating as much art as I had when I was in New York, and it felt like I had wasted my time, so I felt like a failure in that sense. And I didn't ever want to feel that powerless or defeated again. So what happened was I made the conscious choice. If I decided to get another job after this, it would have to contribute to my art practice in some way. In fact, all of my actions have to contribute to my practice. And if the work takes away from it, if it doesn't have anything to do with my practice, then it's not for me. The idea is that you get back what you put in. You have to be focused and dedicated in order to achieve your version of success. I put myself in a position where I was forced to make my art work. Like, I didn't have a plan B. But I'll be the first person to admit that I was being dramatic. It was extreme. I was operating from a place of trauma after having been fired. I think it's very possible, and this probably makes more sense, to hold a regular job so that you can support yourself and set aside time to focus your attention on the thing that you really care about or the thing that you want to achieve. So it's not entirely a matter of putting forth time, but also putting forth intention. Thank you so much for listening to me talk about my artwork and my art practice and my process. I hope everyone is taking care of themselves. You know, and I'll read a quote from a tea bag, right? You know, be kind to others, but be considerate to yourself. And as corny as that sounds, it's very, 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 very true. Continue to be kind to yourself and kind to others. Thank you.